Well, I've just gone round with the sprayer. I did the mounts and a couple of other plants, just ones that need a bit in between the normal waterings because they use it up quickly. I know which ones they are, so I can find them quite easily, although they are scattered all over the place. And they vary an awful lot, and the reasons vary a lot. Some are just putting on a lot of growth, some are in pots that are far too small and they use their water up too quick. Various reasons, and that got me on to thinking about water. And we all need to think about not using perhaps so much water. And then I got on to thinking, actually, we haven't had a look at the new blooms lately. And all in amongst all this, I'm trying to think of a video for today because we've run out of Burnham stuff. But anyway, the Dendrobium conico has finally put out a new cluster of blooms. Lovely colour. I will, when I move these things around in a minute, I'll drag that out. I've got a display mount up here where if I put something up there that's in flower, I can see it when I'm sitting at the computer. And that's had various things come and go on that area there, so the conico can come out. I haven't got another mount with a bloom on it, believe it or not, out of all the mounts I've got. Although I think some of the Brassivola types have got spikes. I haven't looked at them closely because when I go around with the sprayer, rather than looking at the plant, I'm looking at where the water's going so that I don't get it inside new growths and stuff like that, or I do my best not to. Not always possible. Anyway, new blooms. That was the conico. Now, I'm not getting plants down, but the, what's it called? Something Momoko. I'll put a pop up. Look at that manky leaf in front of it as well. But that's the one that won't settle down. It has two flowering cycles, one at the normal nobly time and then one mid to late summer. And the mid to late summer blooms this time are just two. So maybe it is going to settle down. Sweet Pinky Momoko. I knew it would come in the end. So that's that. That's just opening up. I'll get that one out because that can come over in the show area. What else have we got? The Miltonias are doing their thing. So we've got the, these are hybrids, they're not actually true species. And some of them are coming out at some very strange angles, they're a bit tight. But this is the Morelliana look-alike. The true species would have narrower petals and sepals, although the lip would be very similar to that. I really like that bloom an awful lot, the depth of colour and everything. And then the other one, I'm going to have to get the label out. Oh, it's got an old label on it. I have to get that sorted. Oh, that's the Spectabilis. And again, it is actually a hybrid. It's not the true species. Again, nice colours, gentle lilac-y type colours, and then again the deep purple on the lip. Quite honestly, the lip on both of those is almost identical, and they're coming into bloom, but they're large plants, so I'm not sure with the giant Cymbidium up here. I'm not sure there'll be room for both of those, but I'm thinking about twisting round here. A little rearrangement. I'm thinking of turning that round and pushing it tight up to there. Now, that sounds like I'm not going to be able to get at plants, but you have to bear in mind I can get at plants through here. I can get at plants through there, and I just have to remember if I need to lift these plants off, then whatever plants are on this bit would need to come off first, and it won't be that many. But the other thing I was thinking is that when these two Cymbidiums outside come back in, that shelf out there has only got one bonsai on it, and that can easily go somewhere else. That shelf could then come back in here and again go this way round, or that shelf could go there and then this one can twist round and go here. But having them that way, I get more plants and I can still get access. So that's a theory. Right, was that all the new blooms? Kaneko, Sweet Pinky Momoko, and the 2 Miltoniopsis. Yeah, I think that was it. Yes, and water. For me to produce RO water is a little wasteful. And now that most of the heat's gone and I don't need lots of water for the garden, the wastewater that the RO unit produces is going to go down the drain. Now, we all worry about wasting water. And what we have to do is stop and think, where's that water going to go that went down the drain? It's going to go straight to the processing plant and be processed and recycled back in for use. So it's not wasted at all, is it? Think it through. And as it's okay, it is clean water. It's come out of the tap. It's the mains water that's gone through the RO unit, but it's a stronger version of what came out of the tap because it's had the RO pure water taken out of it, which is about 1/3 of it, leaving sort of 2/3 to go down the drain. But it's not being wasted. Okay, it goes down the drain, it's not getting used, but it goes back into the system, yeah? So it's not totally wasted. And then I thought, well, my normal process is to fill the Vanda bucket up. Careful with your language, Roger. That's before I start on the wine. Fill the Vanda bucket up with the RO unit, and then I top up all my bottles using a jug dipped into the Vanda bucket. Once I've filled up all my water, I change the water in the moss, so I tip out the water that's in there and put some fresh in, because it gets stale, you know, it's still water, so it gets stale, so that gets refreshed. And then I end up with the amount of water in the Vanda bucket for the Vandas, and that's about 25 litres of RO water for 2 Vandas. That's going to stop right now. Absolutely right now. And the reason that dawned on me is I've just sprayed the mounts, and I sprayed the Vanda roots while I was going round because I had some feed on the go. And I thought, well, why don't I just spray the roots of the Vanda? That's what a lot of people do. I mean, even if you go to like Dr. Moats in Florida, the Florida Vandas, they don't get dunked. Okay, they use a hose rather than a sprayer, but it's still just wetting the roots a number of times a day maybe over there with that sort of level of heat, and outside in the breeze and everything. I'm not outside in the breeze. Yeah, so I'm going to stop the Vanda bucket. So I will still use the Vanda bucket for the RO unit to fill up, but I will use the water in that bucket and then it can remain empty. You know, I'm filling up that 25 plus litres of water for about 2 weeks worth of dunking 2 plants. That's just not on. So that's going to save me an awful lot of time and processing water. So that's what I was getting at. That was the title of the video, even though we had a look at some blooms. And the thing is, new ideas just pop up in your head every now and again when you're going round, and blow me, we got a spike. Yay! I know this is an awful looking Vanda. Hannah was quite upset when she saw this, but it happened relatively quickly, and I couldn't work out why. I mean, I thought it was some sort of bacterial infection, which it is, but indirectly. This plant was covered in tiny little bugs that I couldn't see. I don't know what they were. Some sort of mite, I suspect, but I can't believe they were spider mites, because why would they only be on one plant in a collection like this? I mean, look, this is touching another plant. So whatever it was had made tiny little bite marks on the leaves, which then became infected. So the first treatment I did was for the spots. So I treated it with a fungicide. I still hadn't seen the bugs. So they carried on biting, and eventually I realised it was bugs and put the systemic insecticide on, and it stopped it basically. And it's now a very tatty looking awful plant. As I said, Hannah bought this for me, and she bought this when she was out of work, and she really shouldn't have spent that sort of money on a plant for me. But it was a bit of a sort of repayment for things I'd done for her while she was out of work, so it was greatly appreciated. I can't lose this plant, it's important to me. But we are going to get some blooms. The last time it bloomed it had 2 spikes at the same time, but it's not at its best at the moment. A lot of these older roots have died and they're covered in algae, so they're not functioning very well, so it's quite difficult to hydrate, and it's only got 1 root pushed out from the top of the stem. I make sure that gets well hydrated, obviously, but 1 root's probably not sufficient to hydrate this plant well enough. But the little Kiki down at the base is pushing on now, and it's now grown its first proper root. Well, it has actually got a couple of other roots, but again they're covered in algae. So this is the future of the plant. This will eventually get separated and grown on, and it may well go in a loose basket or something on its own, with a bit of media, perhaps a bit of moss or something to push it a bit harder. But that's the future of that one. No ID, that one. Now this one does have an ID, and it's got a name about 8 foot long. And this is doing something rather silly, because it's dropping some leaves in the middle of the plant. So it's leaving a hole, because some of these leaves down here, I mean, they're not in the best of condition, I must admit. They will eventually all go. I mean, this one's on its way out. But that's the nature of vandas. They do drop leaves at the base, and you end up with this stem thing, which in ideal conditions grows some more roots. And eventually you can cut the old bit off. But this has grown a lot of roots this year. This has branched out all over the place. So this has got a good root system. And at the moment, no sign of a spike. Let me just have a closer look, because I spray these roots recently. I don't... Oh, look at that. Hey, I was going to say I don't pick the plant up and look at it properly. So we've got a spike on both vandas now. For those of you that are relatively new to the channel, will you get back in there? Thank you. Didn't want to hook up. For those of you that are relatively new in the channel, you won't have seen the blooms on this yet. You're in for quite a surprise. It's a strange vanda. Although many vandas do this sort of thing, this one does it and excels at it. And it opens its blooms at a certain size, and they grow half as big again on top of their opening size. They continue to grow for some considerable time, and they end up enormous and the most gorgeous colour. So you've got that to look forward to. Don't hold your breath. It'll be a while. But yeah, so we've got a spike on both vandas, and I hadn't noticed them despite the fact I watered them half an hour ago. Right, that'll do. So the change in plans for the RO water saves a lot of time and a lot of water, and therefore a lot of wastewater heading back up to the processing plant that doesn't need to go there. That's how I see it. Although it is effectively clean water, isn't it? It's not like some of the other water we send down there to be processed. And while I'm at it, the little, let's see if I can remember, Sogo gratis, I think it is, but whatever it is, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a tiny little, it's a mini phalaenopsis, and it extends the spike, so it's like a continuous bloomer for a while, until the spike gets weak and it just ends up with 1 bloom and is starting to get too long and untidy looking, at which point I take the whole thing off, give the plant a rest, and produce a new spike at a later date. But those little blooms are gorgeous. I'm glad I got that one. Oh, and I've got an apology to make. I said I had Phalaenopsis violacea. Well, no, I haven't. I lost it. What I have got is the other mini phal that was out on the kitchen windowsill and is now in here getting some shade, because the leaves were starting to turn a very pale colour. It was obviously getting far too much light. So yeah, so I say this video is back to some sort of normality. You know, a look at a few new blooms, some thoughts about some of the plants, sort of plans, and, you know, just the general chores of dealing with an orchid grow room, which is a daily thing at this time of year. Give it another couple of months and it'll be every sort of 4 or 5 days, and there'll be very little to do, and that'll go on for some time. But the one thing I have noticed is the heat. My daytime temperatures now, even on a sunny day, if you look up there, that's the remnants of the sun. But that line there is where the sun comes, as opposed to there where it used to come. So that's half of the area of the roof that used to get the sun is now in shade. And that's getting less and less each day as the sun gets lower in the sky. And in the not too distant future, there won't be any sun on the roof, at which point my daytime temperatures are going to stay low. And that will go on right into next year. So my cooler growers are going to love it, and my warmer growers are not going to like it at all. But they're going to have to lump it. And that's how it's going to be. And I can't believe this actually happened. I got an email from my energy company saying, we're going to bill you soon, so could you please give us meter readings for your gas meter and your electric meter so that we get a reasonably accurate billing instead of an estimate, which is always worth doing, trust me. Because if they grossly underestimate, you're going to owe them money, and they don't like that. And if they grossly do it the other way round, you end up paying far too much when you're not using it. And it suddenly dawned on me, all my worries about the energy crisis have just gone away. They've faded to nothing. Why? When I came here, I was given the energy company. I had to have the one that was already here from the people before. I had no choice. And they said, and you won't be able to look for another energy supplier until you've had your first bill. That's how it works with the tenancy arrangement. So I was stuck with that energy supplier and the tariff that they gave me. And guess what tariff they gave me? Fixed for 2 years. They can't touch me. So I don't care how much it goes up, I carry on paying the same. So all this worry about spending the evenings on my armchair with a duvet over me and spending the day with my coat, hat and scarf, I will still be cautious with my usage, but nonetheless I haven't got the worry that I thought I was going to have. So at least that's one bill that isn't going to go mad. But at the moment their estimate, my direct debit, is wrong. I actually owe them quite a bit of money for the electricity, and I've overpaid on the gas. But you know, the gas is going to switch round basically, you know, whereas you use virtually no gas in the summer, it's gas heating, so the heating will come on. But anyway, I haven't got the panic that a huge number of people have got, and I have every sympathy for those people. I mean, I had a look at the increase came through this morning. It's gone from just under £2,000 to £3,500 based on an average usage for the year. Now, imagine if you're on a state pension in this country is about £8,000 or £9,000 a year, and you're going to have to spend £3,500 of that on your energy. Now, strictly speaking, that's not true, because a pensioner is not what you'd call normal usage, because they haven't got a house full of people, have they? I think they base that on the average of 2.4 children, the old, you know, estimate of what an average family is. So that's 2 adults and 2.4 children in the house, and it's based on that. Well, I'm not based on that. I'm based on just me. You know, so it's a different thing altogether. So I wouldn't use anywhere near that amount of energy anyway, not for just me. I mean, there are some say that it doesn't matter how many are in the house, you're going to spend the same on heating. Well, that's not true. You know, if you've got youngsters or babies and things like that in the house, then you need the heating. You can't have a freezing cold house. I'm a hardy individual. I can stand the cold. I'd be quite happy if my evenings, you know, if the temperature was dropping like a stone, because I know I'm going to be all cosy in bed in a minute. And if the worst comes to the worst, I'll get a television up in the bedroom and go to bed early. I'm not spending a fortune on flipping heating. Anyway, perhaps we'll get a mild winter and the problem won't be so bad. But everything's a crisis with the media nowadays. Everything's a crisis, but I think for once they're right. This is a crisis. This is absolutely stupid. A scenario for you. You've got a little company that makes coffee for people. And it's lined up 10 coffees on the counter. It knows what it's cost to make them. And those costs haven't changed. They haven't got to do a huge investment on a big extension out the back or anything like that. But they've produced their 10 coffees and 10 people will buy those coffees. You know, some will go back into the business, some will go in people's pockets, and the people will have had their coffee. Now, if 20 people walk in the door and all say, we want those 10 coffees, why does the price change? They call it supply and demand. How does that affect the price? If the cost of producing the goods, oil, gas, hasn't changed that much, then why has the price gone up that much? It's the same number of companies drilling holes in the seabeds to get the oil out, turning it into gas and all that. That hasn't changed. Well, it has. There's one we're trying to put out of business. We're having a good go at it too. I hope they win. But yeah, you know, the production costs, I can't see how the production costs have changed. And I can't see that the amount that was wanted prior to the pandemic and the amount that's wanted after the pandemic, I can't see how that's changed. So why is it costing so much more? Comes down to that one word beginning with G. Every single time it comes down to that one word, greed. Somewhere there are people making a fortune out of this crisis, and there won't be many of them, and they know who they are, and they just sit there with a smug look on their face, rubbing their hands. And quite honestly, there's not a lot we can do about it, apart from grit our teeth and suffer, which is what a lot of people are going to have to do. It's not just this country, you know. We're still classed as a rich country, and we got people going to food banks, you know, and they're going to become homeless because they can't pay their rent, and all this sort of stuff's going on in one of the rich countries. Well, what about in those countries that aren't so well off? What are they going to do? So yes, for once it is a crisis. Ugh. Right, that's enough of that doom and gloom. But it's there, whether we choose to look at it or choose to ignore it. It don't go away. Anyway, I'm going to make my little contribution by saving quite a lot of water. That's my little bit. Plus the fact I don't have loads of lights on and all that. I never have a light on in a room I'm not in. So I mean, I'm not a wasteful person. And I only put enough water in the kettle for the coffee I'm going to make. I've always been like that. Why are you boiling a full kettle of water for 1 cup of coffee? That's just illogical to me. That's like nonsense. Yeah, so I'm not a wasteful person. You know, I mean, when I go to bed, I turn the light on upstairs from downstairs with the two-way switch, and I turn the downstairs light off. So they're both on for 5 seconds while I get from one switch to the other. And then when I get upstairs, I get undressed and I get in bed and I turn the light off. And when I come down in the morning, because of my silly body clock who will not acclimatise, I get up early. So when I come down in the morning, it's pitch dark. The first light I turn on is in the kitchen. I don't turn an upstairs light on to come downstairs. I can see good enough. I turn the kitchen light on so that I can see to feed the cats and get my coffee. And then I have a little tiny light next to, in the lounge with the computer. So once the cats have had their breakfast and I've made me coffee, that light goes off. So I've now got one tiny little light on and the laptop. Now, okay, the laptop's on nearly all day. Well, on and off nearly all day. But I don't believe a laptop uses a huge amount of energy. And after about 10 minutes, it does go down to whatever they call it, standby mode. It shuts the screen down anyway. It sort of semi-turns itself off. And you have to touch something to get it come back on again. So I'm not a wasteful person. A person looking from the outside at necessities would say that this is an excess. And the energy that I use to keep this going is wasteful. Well, you make your own mind up about that. But at the moment, it's not going anywhere. It's staying. It's my enjoyment. It's my pleasure. And I hope, as a consequence of the YouTube channel, it's some pleasure for some other people too. And as I said, it's not going anywhere. But we will make a killing on saving on the water. That's probably a third of the amount of water that I produce that I now won't need, so I won't produce it. Therefore, the waste doesn't go down to the reprocessing centres, not recycling. And I will see you next time. That's more than enough waffle. We even managed to slot some semi-politics in there. You notice I don't have a go at any particular government. And governments have, different, we have this lot and then we have that lot and then we have the lot over there that could run the country very well but don't get a look in because they're not big enough. Or I don't care which one. Whichever one's in tries to undo what the last lot did and often makes a muck up doing it. And eventually they make enough of a muck up that the other lot get back in again and undo all what the previous lot did. And it goes round and round and round. Do you know what would do the country the world of good and give it a right kick up the whatnot? Let's have a dictator in for a while. And military rule. And see how you like that while you're moaning about the government. Try living under that regime and see how you get on. When your girls aren't allowed to go to school or whatever, So, yeah, we moan too much perhaps, but perhaps in amongst those people, some people are actually doing the best they can. And we can't see them. They're obscured by the figureheads, the public faces. I would imagine in amongst those people there are some people doing their absolute best to put things right. And maybe they don't get heard as much as they should. So I will see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.